Have you ever wondered why you keep repeating the same patterns in your relationships? Why it often feels like you're the one giving more, loving more, sacrificing more, while receiving less in return? Perhaps you've paused to ask yourself if this is normal, or if there's something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface of your emotional world. Today, we're going to explore one of the most common yet least understood challenges of the human psyche: emotional dependency. And to do so, we'll turn to the wisdom of one of the most revolutionary thinkers in modern psychology, Carl Jung. His insights go far beyond conventional explanations of behavior. Jung had a way of illuminating the invisible threads that weave our emotional lives together, often revealing that what we think is personal struggle is actually a profound psychological journey. So, imagine for a moment that you're in a relationship where you constantly feel the fear of being abandoned. Every choice you make, every word you speak, is filtered through the fear of rejection or disapproval. You begin to silence your true self, your wants, your opinions, your boundaries, all in the name of preserving the connection. You mold yourself to fit someone else's expectations, gradually losing sight of who you really are. If this resonates with you, you're not alone, and perhaps even more importantly, there is a way out of this cycle. Jung understood that emotional dependency is not simply a flaw or a personal weakness. It's not about being too emotional or too attached. It's a symptom of something far deeper, a reflection of unresolved inner dynamics playing out in the unconscious mind. He believed that many of these patterns are rooted in childhood, in the way we learned, often unconsciously, how to relate to others, and just as crucially, to ourselves. The issue isn't that we need others, we are social beings by nature. The real problem begins when we surrender our sense of worth, our identity, and our inner peace into someone else's hands. According to Jung, this type of dependency signals a disconnection from what he called the self, the deep, authentic core of our being that exists beyond the ego, beyond masks and expectations. When we lose connection with this vital center, we unconsciously search for something outside ourselves to fill the void. We crave validation, affection, approval, thinking these will give us what we're missing. But what we're really doing is handing over the responsibility for our happiness to someone else. And that's how the cycle of emotional dependency is born. Think back to a time when you prioritized someone else's needs above your own, when you ignored your own boundaries to avoid conflict, when you kept silent about your feelings because you were afraid of being abandoned, or when you changed fundamental parts of who you are just to be accepted. Jung would say that in those moments you were living through your persona, the social mask we all wear to be liked, accepted, and safe, not from your true self. From a Jungian perspective, emotional dependency is a form of psychological projection. We project onto the other person qualities and powers that actually reside within us. We see them as the source of our joy or our suffering. We grant them authority over our self-esteem, our emotional well-being, our sense of purpose, and by doing so, we disconnect from our own inner power. Jung described this as a psychic inflation of the other and a deflation of the self. The person we depend on emotionally becomes disproportionately large in our inner world, while we shrink in comparison. We begin to orbit around them like a satellite, forgetting that we are stars in our own right, radiant and whole, even when standing alone. This dynamic creates a profound imbalance in our relationships. We no longer relate as equals, but from a place of lack, from a hunger for something we believe only the other can provide. And the tragedy is that in this state, we are not truly loving the other person. We're loving the image, the projection, the role they play in our internal drama. We can't see them clearly because we're too busy using them as a mirror to fill what we believe is missing in ourselves. Does it sound familiar? The feeling that you can't live without someone, that your world collapses without their presence. This is what Jung referred to as psychic possession. It's as if part of your psyche has been hijacked by the dependency, making it nearly impossible to think clearly or act freely. But here's the powerful truth. Jung believed that within each of us lies the potential for profound transformation. He called this journey individuation, a lifelong process of integrating all the parts of ourselves, both conscious and unconscious. It's through this inner work that we reclaim the pieces of our soul we gave away, and in doing so, we free ourselves from the chains of dependency, learning instead to relate from wholeness rather than need. The very first step on this path is awareness. Simply recognizing your own patterns of emotional dependency is already a courageous act. Notice, without judgment, how you behave in your relationships. Do you lose yourself when you're with someone? Do you fear expressing disagreement or setting boundaries? Do you feel panic at the thought of being alone? These questions are not meant to induce guilt. They are guideposts, illuminating the areas of your life where healing is needed. Jung teaches us that behind every emotional dependency, there is a shadow, those parts of ourselves that we've rejected or repressed. Maybe early in life, you learned that your worth depended on pleasing others, or perhaps you internalized the belief that you weren't enough on your own. These beliefs settle in our shadow and begin to guide our behavior from the unconscious. For Jung, the encounter with the shadow is essential to our psychological growth. It's not about getting rid of it, but about consciously integrating it. When we face these darker aspects of ourselves directly, we strip them of their control over us. And it's precisely in this courageous act of self-observation that our liberation begins. If you're caught in a cycle of emotional dependency, it's important to understand that this pattern does not define who you are. It is simply a survival strategy you once developed, a way of coping that may have helped you then, but is now holding you back. The journey toward breaking free from emotional dependency involves what Jung would call the withdrawal of projections. This means realizing that the qualities we attribute to others, their ability to complete us, to give us worth, to make us feel safe, are actually aspects of ourselves that we haven't yet acknowledged or developed. When we begin to reclaim these projections, something extraordinary happens. We start to feel more whole within ourselves. We discover inner resources we never knew existed. And paradoxically, we become capable of forming more authentic and fulfilling relationships. Jung also spoke of the importance of cultivating what he called the transcendent function, the psyche's ability to integrate opposites and create something new, especially in the context of emotional dependency. This means finding a balance between our need for connection and our need for autonomy. It's not about moving from dependency to extreme individualism. It's about discovering a way of relating in which we can be interdependent, connected to others, but deeply rooted in our own being. This is a process that requires patience and compassion toward oneself. As Jung said, you don't light up the world by dimming your own light. Every time you commit to honoring your own needs, to setting healthy boundaries, to recognizing your own value Regardless of others' opinions, you're taking a step toward emotional freedom. Emotional dependency is often accompanied by what Jung would call complexes, knots of psychic energy formed around painful past experiences. These complexes are triggered in our current relationships, making us react from old wounds rather than from the present moment. A clear sign we're acting from a complex is emotional disproportion. If your response to a simple disagreement with a partner is overwhelming fear of abandonment, you're likely experiencing the activation of a complex. Jung would encourage us to observe these reactions as messengers from the unconscious, pointing to areas in need of healing. Working with dreams was one of the core tools in Jungian psychology. Our dreams often reveal aspects of emotional dependency that our conscious mind resists seeing. You might dream repeatedly of being lost, trapped, or desperately chasing someone. These symbols may be reflecting your current emotional state. Jung would invite us to keep a dream journal and reflect on the meanings hidden within. Not through rigid interpretation, but with open curiosity. Dreams speak a symbolic language that can help us understand the deeper dynamics of our psyche. Another key concept in Jungian psychology is the idea of archetypes, universal patterns that live in our collective unconscious and shape our experiences in emotionally dependent relationships. Often we activate archetypes like the savior, the victim, or the wounded child. When we rely emotionally on someone, we might be projecting the archetype of the savior onto them, unconsciously hoping they'll rescue us from our fears and emptiness. Or we may identify with the victim archetype, feeling powerless to change our circumstances. Recognizing these archetypal patterns helps us depersonalize our relational dynamics. It allows us to see that we are not merely dealing with our personal stories, but with deep psychic forces that have shaped human experience for millennia. This broader perspective can help us step back and observe our patterns with greater clarity. Jung believed that each of us holds within both masculine and feminine aspects, regardless of biological sex. He called these aspects animus, the masculine in the woman, and anima, the feminine in the man. In emotionally dependent relationships, we often project our animus or anima onto the other person, hoping they'll embody these energies for us. The path to liberation involves recognizing and developing these aspects within ourselves. If you've always depended on others to feel protected or to make decisions, working with your inner animus, your own masculine energy, can be transformative. If you're someone who constantly seeks emotional nourishment from others, connecting with your anima, your internal sensitivity and receptivity, can radically change how you relate to people. Emotional dependency can also be understood as a form of what Jung would call ego inflation. Paradoxically, even though it seems we're making ourselves small before the other, there's a kind of arrogance in believing that we need someone so much that we cannot survive or be happy without them. This belief overestimates the importance of our desires and underestimates our capacity for growth and adaptation. Jung would remind us that life is in constant flux and transformation, and that our psyche holds an innate capacity for self-regulation, if we allow it to operate naturally. Sometimes, the losses and separations we fear the most are exactly what we need to rediscover forgotten parts of ourselves. If you're currently struggling with emotional dependency, I invite you to see this struggle not as a failure, but as an invitation to grow. Jung believed that our deepest psychological wounds also carry the seeds of our greatest transformation. Emotional dependency may be the portal to a deeper understanding of yourself, to greater integrity and authenticity. The path will not always be easy. There will be moments of intense anxiety when setting boundaries or prioritizing your own needs. Moments when loneliness feels unbearable. Times when you'll want to return to old patterns simply because they feel familiar. Jung teaches us that these responses are normal, part of the process. The key lies in observing them without judgment and remembering that each step you take toward emotional freedom is an act of self-love. A powerful practice Jung would suggest is the amplification of symbols. When you find yourself trapped in dependency, ask yourself, what image or symbol reflects how I feel? Maybe you see yourself as a castaway clinging to driftwood or a satellite endlessly orbiting a planet. Whatever image arises, allow yourself to explore it, draw it, write about it, speak with it. This process can uncover dimensions of your dependency that your rational mind couldn't perceive. Jung would also speak of the importance of community in our healing journey. Though the road to emotional freedom is deeply personal, we don't have to walk it alone. Surrounding ourselves with those who respect our process, reflect our truth, and hold space without enabling our dependency can be profoundly healing. Jung would emphasize that freedom from emotional dependency doesn't mean the absence of pain or vulnerability. In fact, as we shed our defenses and patterns, we may initially feel more exposed to life's wounds. The difference is that we now face these wounds from a place of wholeness, not fragmentation. A key Jungian insight is the acceptance of duality. We are not only light, we are also shadow. Not only strong, but also vulnerable. Not only independent, but also in need of connection. Wisdom lies in recognizing and embracing all these aspects of ourselves without identifying exclusively with any one of them. In the context of emotional dependency, this means accepting both our longing for connection and our need for autonomy. It means acknowledging both our strength and our vulnerability. It means embracing both our light and our shadow. In this integration, we find true freedom. Jung also speaks of the elusive treasure, wisdom and wholeness that can only be found by passing through our own psychological hells. Emotional dependency, with all its pain and limitation, can be one of those hells. But the treasure on the other side, an authentic relationship with ourselves and others, is well worth the journey. How does emotional dependency manifest in your life? Maybe you're constantly seeking approval, unable to make decisions without consulting others. Perhaps you lose yourself in romantic relationships, forgetting your own interests and dreams, or stay in toxic situations out of fear of being alone. Recognizing these patterns is the first step toward transformation. The telltale sign of emotional dependency is the emptiness we feel when alone. If solitude feels unbearable, if you constantly need to be in contact with someone to feel okay, you may be dealing with a disconnection from your own center. Jung would invite us to explore this emptiness, not to escape it, because it's precisely in that apparent void that we can rediscover our own wholeness. Another common sign is what we could call a loss of boundaries. In codependent relationships, we often don't know where we end and the other begins. Do we take responsibility for others' emotions or expect them to take responsibility for ours? Jung would teach us that setting healthy boundaries is not an act of rejection, but of love, for ourselves and for the other. Emotional dependency can also show up as an excessive need for control. Paradoxically, the more we depend on someone, the more we try to control the relationship to reduce our anxiety. This control may appear as jealousy, possessiveness, or constant need for reassurance. Jung would show us that this illusion of control is the psyche's attempt to cope with the fear of abandonment, though it only deepens our disconnection. A hallmark of emotionally dependent relationships is the cycle of idealization, followed by devaluation. At first, we see the other as perfect, the answer to all our needs. But when their humanity and flaws inevitably appear, we may plunge into intense devaluation. This cycle reflects our inability to see the other as a whole person, with both light and shadow. Jung teaches that true emotional freedom lies in seeing the other fully, without the distortion of our projections. It also means seeing ourselves in our entirety, accepting both our strengths and our weaknesses. This mutual recognition is the foundation of authentic, fulfilling relationships. The journey toward emotional freedom is not linear. There will be progress and setbacks, moments of clarity and confusion. Jung would remind us that this apparent disorder is part of the natural process of transformation, that sometimes we must tear down old structures before building something new, that sometimes we must get lost to be found. A powerful practice to break emotional dependency is what Jung called active imagination. It's about consciously dialoguing with different parts of our psyche. We might, for instance, visualize the part of us that clings desperately to others and ask it what it needs, what it fears. This inner dialogue can reveal the deep needs we're trying to meet through our dependency. Jung would also speak of the importance of finding meaning in our suffering. Emotional dependency, with all its pain, can be a gateway to deeper self-knowledge, to greater understanding of our core wounds, and to a more authentic connection with ourselves and others. Seeing our suffering through this lens can transform how we relate to it. A key concept in Jungian psychology is synchronicity, those meaningful coincidences that seem to mirror our inner world. If you're in the process of freeing yourself from emotional dependency, you may begin noticing synchronicities related to this journey. Perhaps you keep encountering messages about autonomy or meet people who embody aspects of your path. Jung would invite us to pay attention to these synchronicities as signs that we're on the right path. The integration of opposites is central to Jungian psychology in the context of emotional dependency. It means finding balance between our need for connection and our need for independence. It's not about choosing between being fully independent or completely dependent, but about integrating both needs into a new, healthier way of relating. Jung believed each of us carries a wounded healer within, that part of us which, through our own wounds, gains the ability to help others heal. Many who have overcome emotional dependency discover that their journey has gifted them with profound understanding and compassion for others facing similar struggles. Your healing can become a gift to the world. If you're in the process of breaking free from emotional dependency, remember you're not just leaving behind a dysfunctional pattern. You're stepping into a fuller, more authentic, and more fulfilling way of being and relating. You're reclaiming parts of yourself you once handed over to others. You're discovering your own ability to stand on your own, to nourish your own growth, to become the author of your life. This journey, as Jung would point out, isn't only personal, it's also collective. When you heal your patterns of dependency, you're contributing to the healing of a wider pattern that affects many. You're adding your light to the world, showing others that freedom from limiting cycles is possible. Your personal courage becomes a force for collective transformation. The most powerful moment comes when you realize you don't need anyone to complete you, but you choose to share your wholeness with them. When you understand, you don't need to be rescued, but welcome support. When you know you can survive alone, yet choose connection. This is the balance Jung described as true interdependence. Two whole beings, choosing to create something together. Now ask yourself, what small step can you take today to move toward greater emotional freedom? What boundary needs to be set? What part of you longs to be seen and honored? What old belief are you ready to release? Remember that every small step matters, that every act of self-love counts. This journey toward emotional freedom isn't just about letting go. It's also about reclaiming. Reclaiming your power, your voice, your right to choose. Reclaiming those parts of you once pushed into shadow. Reclaiming your right to a full life, not shaped by others' validation or presence, but by your connection to what Jung called the self, that divine spark which is the source of your true identity. Emotional dependency may have made you feel small, powerless, incomplete. But there is within you, as Jung reminds us, an unlimited potential, an innate capacity for healing and growth. Your true nature is not dependency, but wholeness, not fear, but love, not fragmentation, but integrity. The path to this integrity is rarely smooth. You will face resistance inside yourself and from those around you. Parts of you may cling to old patterns because they feel familiar, even if they're painful. People in your life might resist your growth because it challenges the existing dynamics. Jung would have us see this resistance not as a barrier, but as part of the process, as a sign we're touching something meaningful. This journey has no final destination. Individuation, as Jung described it, is a continuous unfolding, a process of becoming, integrating, and self-discovery. Each level of emotional freedom you reach opens the door to new insight, new challenges, new opportunities for growth. And within that constant unfolding lies the beauty and purpose of life. If you're in the middle of this journey now, know this: you are not alone. Every step you take toward emotional freedom is an act of courage. Every time you honor your own needs, set a healthy boundary, or recognize your worth, you're not just healing your life, you're also contributing to collective healing. He believed deeply in the transformative power of awareness. Each time we bring light to an unconscious pattern, it loses its power over us. Your emotional dependency, once acknowledged and understood, can no longer control you the same way. You've already started your liberation simply by listening to this message, by being willing to look at these patterns with honesty and compassion. I invite you to share your reflections. What part of this message spoke to you? What patterns have you recognized in your own life? What steps have you taken toward your emotional freedom? Your voice, your experience, might be the light someone else needs on their path. And remember, this space is a community where we're all learning, growing, and supporting one another in this journey toward greater awareness and freedom. If this message resonated with you, consider sharing it with someone who might benefit. Sometimes, the right message reaches someone at the exact moment they need it. Your act of sharing might be the spark for someone else's transformation. I also invite you to subscribe if you haven't already, and to turn on notifications so you don't miss future messages on deep psychology, personal growth, and the journey toward a more authentic life. Together, we are building a community of people committed to their own development and to raising collective awareness. Thank you for being here, for your openness, for your courage in exploring these deep topics. Emotional dependency does not define who you are. It's just a pattern, a habit, a strategy you developed at some point to survive. But you are so much more than your patterns. You are a being in constant evolution, with infinite capacity to transform your life and relationships. Jung would remind us that the journey to emotional freedom is not one we walk alone. We are supported by the collective wisdom of all those who have walked this path before us. We are all connected by something far deeper than what we see on the surface. Beneath the masks, beneath the roles we play, beneath the stories we've been told and the ones we've created about ourselves, there exists a shared humanity, a universal thread that links every one of us through our pain, through our healing, through our hopes and silent prayers. We are united by the ache of longing, the search for meaning, the quiet battles we fight in the solitude of our minds, and the invisible wounds we try to mend without anyone noticing. And within this vast interconnection, there is a profound comfort, a sacred refuge, and a strength that transcends the individual. You are not alone in your struggle. Your story is not isolated, and even in your moments of deepest sorrow, you are still part of something greater, something timeless. The human journey, one of falling, rising, forgetting, and remembering. Let me leave you with this final reflection. Emotional freedom is often misunderstood. It is not the cold absence of need. It is not the armor that makes us untouchable, nor the illusion that we must walk alone to be strong. Emotional freedom is not about silencing your heart or rejecting your desires in the name of self-reliance. True emotional freedom is something far more courageous. It is the ability to recognize your own needs and to speak them aloud. Not from fear, not from desperation, but from a place of self-respect and clarity. It's about honoring what you feel, not suppressing it. It is being open enough to be vulnerable, without giving your power away. It is standing in your truth, even when it's inconvenient, even when it shakes the ground beneath your feet. To be emotionally free is to love without losing yourself. To give, not from emptiness, but from wholeness. It is the art of holding space for others while also holding your own boundaries sacred. It is choosing relationships that reflect your worth, not your wounds. This kind of freedom, this quiet liberation, is not something far away, hidden in some distant future. It's not a goal reserved only for the enlightened or the healed. It is here, now, in this very moment. It lives in every decision you make to come back to yourself. Every time you choose to stop abandoning your own needs for the comfort of others. Every time you say no with love. Every time you say yes to what truly matters. It lives in your courage to reclaim the pieces of yourself you gave away, the dreams you set aside, the truths you silenced, the voice you buried. The path is already in front of you. You don't have to know every step. You just have to be willing to take the next one. Because the journey to emotional freedom isn't about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you've always been beneath the layers of fear and conditioning. The next step is yours. And remember what Carl Jung once said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. And maybe this is the moment, the one where you stop waiting for permission. The one where you realize that the clarity you've been searching for has been within you all along. That your light isn't something you have to earn. That your power doesn't come from control. It comes from awareness, from presence, from the brave act of returning to yourself, again and again. It's time. Time to awaken your own light. Time to reclaim your voice, your power, your dignity. Time to walk away from the cycles that keep you small. Time to rise from the ashes of old stories and step into the truth of who you are. You don't have to keep surviving. You are allowed to live. Fully. Authentically. Powerfully. Break free from the chains of emotional dependency. Reconnect with your inner self. And remember, the world doesn't need a perfect version of you. It just needs you. Real, whole, awake. That's where your freedom lives. And it starts now.